Good morning, I'm Larry Spencer, and I'm part of the Retired Faculty and Staff PSU 150th Anniversary Committee, and one of the things that we're doing is videotaping retired faculty and staff. And with me today is Wavell Fogelman, so good morning, it's 21st of August, so summer's almost over, Wavell.
Yep.
So the first question we have is that when did you arrive in Plymouth, and what was your position at the time of arrival?
I got here in the fall of 1977, and I came in as an assistant professor. I was interviewed and offered the job right on the spot, and it was interesting that somebody said, don't take the associate professor position because you'll get a step raise if you start out as an assistant professor. So that's what I did.
Okay. And what were you teaching at that time?
I was teaching all chemistry courses at the time.
Including Gen Chem?
Gen Chem, yeah, some of the Gen Ed courses, analytical chemistry. We weren't doing environmental chemistry at that particular point. That came later.
Okay. And what was your impression of the town of Plymouth at that time? And where had you come from?
Well, I had come from the big city of Norfolk, Virginia, where I had been teaching for 7 years at Old Dominion University. And so I grew up, in a rural area, and I was very pleased with the Plymouth area. It had everything I needed: grocery stores, shops, restaurants. It was great.
I can't remember, was Hatch Plaza at that time developed?
No, Hatch Plaza had not yet come into being. There was still.
So you had Adams or
We had grocery store down on Main Street, absolutely.
Right.
And the nice thing about Plymouth was that very quickly everybody knew you.
Right.
You knew the clerks, you knew everybody. So it was very, very nice.
And of course, having been at Old Dominion, which is a fairly decent-sized campus, what was your impression of the campus of PSC at that time?
Well, the campus was, compact, and it was easy to get around. The buildings were adequate. Yeah, it was a nice campus.
And what was your impression of the students that you had sort of during this initial time that you were here in the late 70s and early 80s?
Well, I think the students were all probably first-time students in their family. I don't think many of the students had parents who were college educated. But there were many, many good students. Of course, a wide variety, as you would expect at any institution. But I had some really good students as part of my classes.
Okay. And what was your impression? I assume at this time you were part of the natural science department?
That's correct, yes.
What was your impression? I assume probably at Old Dominion you were part of the chemistry department.
Correct.
So what was your impression of coming into sort of a multidisciplinary department as compared to a single discipline department?
Well, actually, I found it to be nice. I enjoyed it. I mean, I'm a sort of a multidisciplinary person myself. I enjoyed the relationship with the biologists, with the geologists. We didn't have a weather group at that particular point. That came a little bit later. But I found the colleagues in the natural science department to be very nice to deal with and congenial, and yeah, it was good.
Do you remember who was chair at that time?
Alan Davis was chair when I was hired, and I don't remember whether he passed that on to Mark Sylvester not long after, but anyway, Alan was chair.
Okay.
And he was a good chair. He helped me out, yeah.
And what did you think of the facilities that you had here compared to what you might have had at Old Dominion?
Well, the facilities were a little less impressive in the sense that the building was reasonably new. I guess it was built in 69 or 60, somewhere along in the late 60s. So it wasn't antiquated or anything like that, but coming from a chemistry building with 4 floors and the whole thing dedicated to chemistry, it wasn't a disappointment. We could do everything that we needed to do. There was a little instrumentation issue here and there, but we worked on getting the instrumentation up.
And what about the complaints from the foreign language department about leaking water on their Xerox?
Oh well, yes, we did have the foreign language department with us for a while until Hyde Hall was opened and they could move away. But yeah.
I don't know how many times we leaked out in terms of their offices and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you came here, did you have anyone to sort of mentor you in terms of integrating you into the campus at large, or?
I wouldn't say I had a mentor as such, no one assigned to me in particular. Al Davis was very good at answering questions and so forth about things, explaining what the gen ed system was like at that time and what my role would be. I did get fairly quickly involved in faculty governance and that sort of thing, working on committees. One of the things I was impressed about when I came to Plymouth State for my interview and talked to the dean at the time, there was a form that said, how much of your time do you want to spend on various kinds of things? And it was a minimum of 70% teaching.
Right.
And you could choose what you wanted to do with the other 30%. You want to do all research, you want to do some service and research, etc. And I decided when I got out of graduate school, before I even started teaching at Old Dominion, that I really wanted to be in a school that focused on students and teaching as opposed to research. Not that I don't like research, but I had decided basically if I wanted to do research, I'd go into industry where I could do it full-time, devote myself. And so when I was looking for another position while at Old Dominion, I was looking for schools that focused on teaching. And so I was very pleased to come here where the focus is on the students and the teaching that you were going to do.
Okay. And can you, recall any students that you've mentored that have gone on for, success?
Oh, wow.
You've been here for a long time, so you've had a lot of students.
I was here 31 years,
Right,
and there are a lot of students, but of course I've been retired for 10 years now.
Right,
So
but you had a lot of people.
but I
that you
did.
probably
I
had
did
gone
have a number of students. I had one student who decided to be a chemistry major and actually went off to my old graduate institution at Tulane University to work on his PhD. And eventually he decided not to get his PhD, but he became a high school teacher.
Okay.
And is currently living down in Rockingham County, and
Okay, so he's back.
we're back in touch. I have several other students who went into teaching chemistry in various high school capacities. And of course, Marguerite Crowell, who still works for the
Right.
department as a
Disappeared.
technician, she was a good student too.
Right. And so, how did you see the department changing over the time that you were here, and what role might have you played in some of those changes?
Well, of course, the department chair position at Plymouth State is a three-year appointment typically, and so at the end of 3 years you decide whether you want to try to continue on, and then the department has to decide whether they want you to continue on. So we had numerous elections of the department chairs, and eventually I was elected department chair, and that gave me an opportunity to make a few changes in the way the philosophy or the mode of operation of the department. I told the department, I'm here to support you. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm not here to make decisions for you. I'm here to see that things go well for you. If you need something, let me know, and I'll work with the administration to see if we can get that to happen for you. So that was one of the things that I thought I tried to do as department chair. And I guess the department liked that okay because they re-elected me a couple times.
Right. And a couple of things, and you haven't been in the same department as you, I know one of the big things that you did was, I guess you would say, the renovation of Boyd Hall. Tell us a little bit about that project and what it involved and how
Okay.
it came about.
Well, in about 2001 or so, I'm not quite sure who had the original impetus to restore or add on to Boyd Hall, but the administration decided that there was to be a renovation and an addition to Boyd Hall because we all felt we needed more space, we needed more lab space, there were more faculty as time went on. So as the department chair at the time, I was the one who was the point person, as it were, from the department to coordinate with the designers, with the administration, vice president in charge of the campus facilities. And so I worked with the department to have them go around and look and say, well, what do you think you need for the biology labs? What do you think you need for the meteorology labs? What more do you need for the chemistry labs? And so I was the person who was back and forth. I think I kept count. There were 65 meetings that I had to go to between the time the building process, planning process started and the actual shoveling and so forth for the opening of the building happened out on the lawn. A lot of things happened, and it was an interesting and fun time. Of course, when the building happened, one of the things that happened was it was decided that people who were in the old part of the building were not going to have things any worse than the people who were going to be in the new part of the building. So they actually refurbished the old part of the building. They tore out all the plumbing, they tore out all the electricity, they redid everything so that you could only tell what part of the building you were in, the old or the new, because there was a little seam on each floor that you could say, once you walked across this, you're in the old part or the new part. But other than that, you couldn't tell by being in somebody's office or being in somebody's lab which part of the building you were in. And that was an important thing, was to make sure that it wasn't just an addition and some people were going to get it good.
Actual renovation.
Absolutely. They put a bobcat inside the building and pushed all the stuff out. I remember that was kind of an interesting thing.
Well, another story, I don't know if you gained from it, but they did away with all the storage cabinets, and they were going to take them all to the dump. And I think you probably recognize that Chris Shabbat, myself, Dick Freilich, and I don't know if you ended up with anything, but we were the people that took all the cabinets away before they got to the dump.
Right. Well, I didn't take any of that stuff, but I do recall that the digging of the foundation was going to require them to take out all the plantings that they had done, all the bushes and so forth and so on. And so they said, well, yeah, we're just going to take those over and dump them in the woods. So I borrowed a pickup truck and took some bushes home and took some plants home. They're still living at my house.
Right, right. Now, you're also here during a major transition. You mentioned earlier that there was no meteorology program.
Right.
You were here during the time that we did establish a meteorology program.
Right.
What kind of impact did you think that had on the sciences and particularly on the renovation of Boyd Hall?
Well, I think the addition of the meteorology program, it very quickly became one of the most outstanding ones in New England. There are a few meteorology programs in New England. Of course, MIT has one, as they would expect, but it very quickly became a very widely respected department. And the number of students increased. They needed space. They needed facilities for all their computer equipment, etc. And so, that department actually increased the, shall we say, the stature of the whole natural science department. And of course, it wasn't until we actually moved into the new renovated Boyd Hall that the biologists decided that they wanted to have their own department. And so there was a split, so that biology went off and chemistry and meteorology and physics and geology stayed in another department.
Right, right. And what do you think that had in terms of, let's say, having more students come to the college? And I assume meteorology students had to take chemistry too.
Sure.
What impact did that have in the chem program?
I wouldn't say it had a lot of impact on the program, other than other than the fact that the students who were going into meteorology typically were some of the best students. They were well prepared because they knew that they were going to be going into a discipline that required mathematics and physics and chemistry and that sort of thing. And so they were some of the best chemistry students in the chemistry classes because of that.
Now, when you came in '77, I think the road still went through the campus, and I don't know what buildings might have been added at that time, but if you look at the campus today, we have a sort of a complete campus. In fact, we have to cross Highland.
Right.
What impact did that have on your thinking about the college as a college, or the role of the PSU in the New Hampshire system of higher education?
Well, I'm not sure that taking out that making the roads walking ways had much to do with anything relative to the system. Plymouth State, in my mind, was always looked upon by the Board of Trustees and the system as being a very, very good institution. And I think students in the state felt the same way. That's not to say that it was better than any other institution, but I think they all felt that it was a very high-quality institution. Having the streets become walking so that there were no streets going between Rounds and the other buildings and so forth, and between Hyde and the other thing, that made the campus safer. So that was good.
Well, sometimes people toss out the words first choice and second choice and what have you. When you came, did you think that Plymouth was first choice for some of the students, or would they rather have gone to Durham? And later on in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, did you see the students coming here as first choice rather than second choice?
I don't know that I really ever queried a lot of students about that, but I have a sense that many of them did come here as their first choice institution. I had some who came here and did very well in their first year and did transfer because they saw an opportunity to move on, and students do that no matter where they are. They might have gone to UNH and transferred to here, but the students do sometimes transfer. So I think the students looked at Plymouth State as, oh boy, I'm going to a good institution. Yeah.
And of course, there's a lot of attraction because of the closeness to the ski areas.
Right, and in those days we had very high accomplishment sports teams. Our football quarterback was making Sports Illustrated's cover and so forth, and so the sports teams were great. They're still good, yeah, the attraction of the institution did, of course, have a lot to do with nearness to hiking, to skiing, to outside activities besides school.
And it's always interesting. I know I've talked to kids that have gone to Ohio State, and they say, well, I went there for the football team. And then you ask them, did you go see any of the games? No, it was too expensive.
Right.
And I think the same thing with Plymouth students. Did you come here for the skiing? Yes. Have you ever gone skiing? No.
Right.
But having it available and being able to brag to your compatriots, oh, I can go skiing if I want, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. One of the interesting things about Plymouth State is that we have winterim.
Right.
We have summer school in January, as it were.
Right.
And there are a fair number of students who actually come in January, take a course, and work at the ski resorts. And the ski resorts bring a bus down to pick them up and take them up there. And so this gives them a chance to either catch up or to get ahead or to make a little money to help them pay their tuition and so forth. So there is a relationship in some ways between some of the students, at least, and the ski industry.
Now, can you remember when you came, who was the president of the university? Or
well,
the college at that time?
it's interesting. I came in September of '77, and Casper Marking started in July of '77. He replaced Harold Hyde that same year. And I think I sensed in the change in presidents a breath of fresh air coming on campus. Marking encouraged people to do new things, or if they had new things that they'd been wanting to do, but President Hyde had sort of said, oh, we don't really need that. We got the Medieval Forum, we got the Honors Council, we got an honors dorm. We'd had lots of faculty who had ideas that Dr. Marking was ready to go and say, let's give it a try. That was great.
So, and continuing on in that same vein, how did you see sort of the relationship between the faculty and the administration change during the 30-odd years that you were here?
Oh, well, there were a number of presidents. We had Marking, we had Farrell, and so forth, Wharton, and some interim presidents. And then finally Sarah Jane was president when I retired. I think the relationship between the faculty and the higher administration was always reasonable. There were some times when the administrators were not totally on board with some of the changes the faculty would like to see. They maybe had some ideas of their own that the faculty didn't care a lot about. won't go into what's going on now because I haven't been here, so I can't really say what the faculty attitudes are at this point. But for the most part, the faculty got along with the administration. We have had a strong faculty governance. We have town meetings monthly still, I think. And I was faculty speaker. I was in faculty governance quite a bit for a while. And I actually served in the administration for a couple of years as Associate Dean for Undergraduate Studies. And so I got to see how the administration at that particular time was operating, and I felt that they were reasonably good at listening and you know, wanting to cooperate and wanting to help the faculty get on with things.
So, and another transition that you were here for was from Plymouth State College to
Right.
Plymouth State University. What are your reflections on that transformation?
I don't think it made a great deal of difference on campus. We had always had some graduate courses before the university name came into play. It may have changed the stature of things. It made getting some kinds of grants more probable, because as university status, there were certain kinds of grants that you could get that you couldn't get as a college. So there was some benefit to having the university name, definitely.
And again, I sort of asked this a little bit earlier, is that when you first came here, was there somebody that sort of mentored and influenced you in the 30 years that you were here? Were there some sort of people on the faculty or staff that you seen ended up with a close relationship in terms of influence you, or you influencing them?
Well, I would say that there were a lot of faculty that I admired, that I thought would be good to emulate. There were a lot of faculty who were either in faculty governance or were leaders in their department. I mean, I can think of Henry Vidham, I can think of Bill Taylor. I could go on and on with a list of names of people who I respected very much. I thought they were leaders in their departments, or they were leaders in campus life in many ways. So we did go through a number of changes. One of the changes that happened about the time I got into the administration myself was, when I came, there was a Dean of Graduate Studies and a Dean of Continuing Education, etc. And those positions all disappeared. They had a Director of Continuing Education. They went from deans to directors. So for a while there was a getting rid of deans. There were fewer actual administrators. And then, of course, over time, we went from having deans to provosts and assistant provosts and so forth. So the number of administrators ballooned back again and got to be much larger. And of course, when they became the university, now we had to have schools of business, schools of education, schools of arts and sciences, and so each of those had to have a leader. So the number of administrators over time fluctuated, and when we became a university, it got to be quite a few more.
Now, were you involved in any of the attempts to unionize the faculty during that time period?
I was never particularly a pro-union person. I was always quite interested in the fact that the faculty here, while I was here, always voted the union down. It came up maybe 2 or 3 times, not very often, but 2 or 3 times it did come up, and it was always voted down. I had the feeling that our faculty liked the fact that the unionized campuses the faculty could not speak directly to the administration. They could not speak to the trustees. Only the union representative could do it.
Right.
Whereas when the trustees came on campus to have a meeting, they would always have a side meeting at some point where they would invite faculty to come in. Tell us what your problems are here. Tell us what issues you have with the university system, and they would listen. And we felt that was more important than being unionized and having a union that would tell people, what we wanted to do. And of course, at the same time, we had the benefit that because Keene and UNH were unionized, whatever benefits their faculty got as far as, say, salary or whatever we're concerned, we got it too, because we couldn't be left out.
Right. And of course, you were also here during the time period when a couple of our presidents went on to become the chancellor of the university.
Yeah,
system.
that's right.
So, you've been here for, 30-odd years. What would you say have been the major changes or transformations during that time period? Not only in the college, other than the fact that we talked about the change into becoming a university, but also in the town and the relationship of the college to the town.
Well, several things I guess have happened. We have had presidents who didn't really seem to care much about the town-gown relationships, as you would call them. Sarah Jane was fairly famous for having mended up some of that. One of the things that has happened over the years is that students have more and more apartment and other kinds of living on campus, and I think that was one of the goals of the administration, was to make it possible for more and more students to live on campus in kinds of environments besides just a small dorm room, to have student apartments and so forth. And this brought some of the students who previously might have lived out in the town and created issues for the neighborhoods with noise and parties and drinking and so forth. That was brought onto campus, not the noise and the parties and the drinking, but the students were brought on campus more and more. And so I think that was good healing in many ways. But I think the town certainly would dry up if the university were to close down tomorrow and we were all to move away. I mean, the services that the town provides for the employees that live here in terms of groceries and restaurants and shops and so forth, most of that wouldn't be needed if the university wasn't here.
So, and of course, what kind of changes have you seen in the student body? I mean, as you said, probably when you came here, the students that you had were first-generation students. When you left, I assume that percentage of first-generation students probably was fairly small, and many, were second or even third generation.
Right, that's possible. Yeah, there's been some interesting changes, I would say, to some extent while I was here, because of course the administration has to pay the bills.
Right.
And over time, when I came, the university system and the state legislature were providing about 19% of the campus budget. And so tuition had to make up the other 81%. Over time, that amount of money that was being put in from outside the university had to be made up by more and more students. And I recall quite clearly in, say, about 92, the standards for admission were dropped fairly significantly in order to make sure that we had enough students to pay the bills. And at the end of that fall semester, there was a much, much higher rate of attrition than there had been in any other year, and I think they realized that that was not a good step, and they didn't repeat that step yet. But the students that we had when I was here, I would say that they were quite good quality students. Again, I don't know, I never really questioned them all that much about, well, did your grandma go to college and so forth. But
right. I mean, it is always interesting. I taught a graduate limnology course, and the woman I had in the graduate limnology course, I had a mother and father in general biology at some time prior to that.
I wondered, being here 31 years, I wondered if I would ever get to the point where I might have a student of a former student.
Right. She
I know of at least one student I had back in the 70s who has now retired. She was a student who was in at that time, our medical technology program, and became a medical technologist, then went on to become a physician's assistant, and she's now a retired physician's assistant. So she was sort of a non-trad to begin with, but still, she's now 60-something and has retired.
Right.
So.
Now, some of our faculty have taken students abroad for study abroad, or for, like Len Reitzma and Carrie Urovitz and something down to Puerto Rico or what have you. Have you ever had a chance to do something like that with students off campus?
Not really. It's kind of hard to take your chemistry lab with you. I did teach environmental chemistry.
Okay.
And I required my students to do some out in the environment work, a research project, either together or individually. And so I encouraged them, and I went out with them sometimes, not far away, but in the local environment, to look at various streams, to look at various soil areas and so on, to help them see that chemistry can be done and should be done,
Sort of
needs to be being done out in the environment.
Right. And I know from my own personal experience that you are very much interested in birds. How were you able to take that interest into the college environment?
Well, I actually taught ornithology for a couple of years. We had a person, Dr. Fry, who, when he was hired, before I came onto the campus, was trained in ornithology, but he never really seemed to have an interest in putting together a scientific ornithology course. He taught bird recognition and so forth. So finally, when he retired, I decided that I would teach ornithology. And I had been studying ornithology since I was 13 years old. As such, I never had formal graduate training in ornithology, but I felt I knew enough about it to do it, and I did. I taught it every other year for about 3 times. And then we hired Dr. Reitzma, who was hired as a PhD ornithologist, so I gave him all my notes and said, go for it, that's great. And this is one of the advantages, I think, of being in a Department of Natural Science at the time. As you know yourself, you taught geology.
Right.
You were hired as a biologist, but you also taught geology. So you had that opportunity, which you would not have had you been in a big school in a biology department.
Right. And so we're sort of, approaching, roughly we're trying to do about 30 minutes.
Okay.
And so one of the questions that we usually end up asking the people is there something that we haven't talked about that you want to add to this interview, either related to the growth of the college or the growth of the department or the growth of the town or just anything that we haven't really talked about that you think should be brought up?
Well, I guess one of the things that I have thought about that I was involved in a fair amount was that back in the middle 80s, the general education system underwent a change. As you recall, when I came in the late 70s, the general education system consisted of basically sort of like a Chinese restaurant menu. You took 5 courses from column A and 5 courses from column B and 5 courses from column C. And if column C happened to be your major, you didn't have to take any more courses in that, and so forth. And students could, because math and science were in the same column, students could decide, oh, I'll just take all math courses and forget about science, or vice versa. And so there were a lot of us on campus who felt that system was not serving education and the rounding of students well. And so we went through a fairly arduous, lengthy process of looking at other general education systems around the country, everywhere from Harvard to, you name it, and trying to figure out what could better serve the students. So we came up with a new general education system in about 1985, which caused the students to have to encounter philosophy, have to encounter literature, and also having an integrative component where the students took a course where they had to take information that they had gained from several general education courses and look at some issue from that point of view. I taught a course myself in New England with a person from the archaeology department and a person from the English department. So we looked at New England both from its historical aspects, the environmental aspects of the New England environment, from the Indians and so forth. We looked at and writing things written about New England or within New England. So I think this general education thing that I worked very, very hard on, I actually was on the committee as you might call me the clerk, as you were, or I wasn't the chair of the committee, but I was the person.
Was Sally Baldwin was chair at this
I
time,
think Sally might have been chair. John, can't remember his name right now, from the history department.
John Allen?
John Allen was one of those people. And then when I became associate dean, I was appointed, I was a member of the committee de facto as in that position. So I know that that went on for a number of years, and eventually the faculty decided that, well, maybe the pendulum had swung too far. As pendulums do in curriculum, you go from the very, very general, which is what we had when we got here, to the very, very specific. They decided, well, maybe that's a little too specific. Let's back off a little bit from that. So what you have now here is not that as specific as it was. But I think that was a very important change, and I think the students really did appreciate it as well.
One last question. You've been here for 30 years. The town has changed. You retired. You've been here for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Often when people retire, they move someplace else, but the fact that you're still here says that there must be something about this community that sort of keeps you here. What is it about the Plymouth area that has kept you here?
Well, the Plymouth area, as we all know, you are close enough to Boston or close enough to New York if you want to drive 5 hours to get there. You're close enough to the big cities. If you want to go there, you can get there relatively easily. And yet you are almost in the woods. We're right on the edge. The edge of things is moving further north, though. I mean, it used to be that there was nothing down in Tilton, but
right.
now there's a lot of stuff there. But it's a comfortable place. I have lived here since 1977. I think there have been 3 murders in that time. It's relatively crime-free. Yes, our house was broken into one year while we were off on vacation, but it's a relatively crime-free area. The people in town are friendly. I just find it great. We have, our doctors are here, our dentists are here, our friends are here. Yes, we sort of sometimes say, I'm tired of shoveling the snow or blowing the driveway or whatever, and maybe we will in the next few years move somewhere. I think maybe our next move will be to downsize from a 4-bedroom house to a condo or something, so somebody else has to do all that snow shoveling and lawn mowing and so forth. And whether that will be here in this town or not, maybe not. But we enjoy Plymouth very much.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being willing to have us videotape you. And
Okay.
as I say, these will be going in the archives, and we
Okay.
hope that sometime someone will sit down and take some of the material like Ken Burns and put it together.
Okay,
on the
sure.
show. We're also hoping to have a little bit of a presentation coming up at this October faculty staff luncheon that comes up. So again, thank you very much, and